Last week, I asked you guys to give me your hottest of hot takes in regards to music, and you guys gave me a lot of them. Because I got so many, I can slim it down to about 10 of them. We can do future videos of this as well. But if you want to leave another hot take on my TikTok or Facebook.com/SchnozzyMusic, by all means do that, and I'll have no problem answering you directly. This one is by Scott Erickson on Facebook. This one says, Pink Floyd has been played to death, can't listen anymore. That varies to me. That depends on where you rank them all time. Some people don't like Pink Floyd at all, but a lot of folks have them safely in the top 5 to 6 to 7 greatest bands of all time for a good reason. Wish You Were Here gets played like crazy, Comfortably Numb. A lot of their stuff, because they were so good, gets a lot of airwaves. And like I said, for good reason. They're not a bad band. They're not a horrible band. They're an all-time great band. And if you are a band as good as Pink Floyd, you're probably going to see a lot of airwaves. That goes for any musician, whether you're a band, a solo act, a 2-piece, 3-piece, whatever the case may be. You're going to get played for a long time, especially when you are as good as those guys were, so I see no problem with it. This one's from Rob. I'm not even going to try and pronounce your last name. Any rap, oh wait, that's not actually music. Much like most things in music, rap is a preference thing. Some people loathe it, some people hate the existence of it, some people just don't like it. I can tell you that I liked rap a lot during the 90s and the 2000s. I was born in the mid-90s, right? So I grew up as a kid seeing Eminem's peak, and then eventually you got Lil Wayne, and then you got, I know Drake's more of a pop and singer kind of guy, but even he had some good rap. Kanye West, all those guys. But seeing what we have now compared to what we did have, I don't want to knock anybody that's making a career out of it now or those that like it. I just think the genre of rap has taken several steps back compared to what it used to be. I hear people now that can't even stay on beat. They're not even rapping anymore. They're more so just talking through it. You know what I mean? So today's iteration of rap, I'm not a big fan of, but the genre itself and the history of it, I can safely say I enjoy it. From Patrick Conway, the majority of John Lennon's solo work is tedious and irritating. This one's tough too because I do feel like John has a lot of really good stuff, but then there's a lot of bad stuff too. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of his solo work, but I loved Imagine, I loved Woman, I love Power to the People, I love So Is This Christmas. I loved a lot of things that John did as a solo act, but I felt like he was really at the peak of his powers when he was with the Beatles and he was sharing songwriting duties with Paul McCartney. Again, liked him as a solo act. I think Paul was probably the better solo act between the two, but John's solo stuff, it could pass. I just think that he himself as a talent was better with the Beatles. From Jays Fitzgibbons, Led Zeppelin, Beatles, Rolling Stones, Black Sabbath all suck. Mr. Fitzgibbons, all due respect, I'm not sure if you're trolling or if you're actually being serious, but a lot of those bands, actually all of those bands, are safely in my top 10 of all time, so I can't really knock them. I enjoy each and every one of those bands you mentioned. Perhaps, again, it's a genre thing where you like something else or you like somebody else, but those bands are all-time greats, and I don't think any one of them are truly bad. This one's from Glenn Peters. The Rolling Stones are overrated. Mr. Peters, I respectfully disagree with you on this one. I think the Rolling Stones are held in the greatest of regard. They're oftentimes placed in the top 5, top 6 band of all time. They're a really polarizing band as well, because some folks will just not even have them in the top 10, but some folks will have them where they belong in the top 5. They are the standard for longevity, in my opinion, 60 plus years. They lost Brian Jones early. They had Ronnie Wood added eventually. Mick Jagger, Richards, one of the best songwriting duos of all time. I feel like they're held in high regard for a good reason. I don't think you last as long as they do and you don't have some sort of greatness within you. You know what I mean? So, again, I can see why some wouldn't have them in the top 3 to top 4, but when you start saying, like, outside of top 10, that's where I'm like, oh, I can't agree with you on that one. But overrated, I don't agree. This one's from Laura Penland. Whitesnake is the worst band ever. I like Whitesnake. I think they were good for their time. I think they're still good now. Their music holds up all these years later. I don't think they're the worst band of all time. I really couldn't tell you who I think is the worst band of all time, but if you think you have an answer for the worst band of all time that is not Whitesnake, by all means, comment down below and entertain the conversation, because I really could not tell you who I think is the worst band of all time, but I don't think it's Whitesnake. This one's from Wendy Newman. Lane Staley was a better vocalist than Chris Cornell. This one is like the razor-thin, close comparison. I think these two are the best vocalists of the 90s, especially with the grunge movement. I feel like Lane was harder to replicate with his vocals and how he was with just so many of those songs, whether it's Man in the Box, Rooster, Wood. Cornell probably had, I don't know, Cornell may have had more range, but with Lane's vocals and how he was able to hit I don't know, it's so difficult. I'm trying to think of who was better than who at what, but I really can't tell you who was better. I think it's honestly pretty damn close between Cornell and Lane Staley. Like I said, I do think they're better than Kurt, and I do think they're better than Eddie Vedder. Those guys were good too, but Lane and Cornell as vocalists, that's really, 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 again, that's like the razor thin margin because they were both supremely gifted vocalists, both gone too soon as well. But if you say Lane's better than Chris, I have no issue. If you say Chris is better than Lane, I have no issue because they were both A1 talents when it came to being a vocalist. One's from Tom Rupin. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Bob Dylan was a terrible singer. I was reading that, I laughed a little bit because I really don't think this is a hot take. I feel like most folks know Bob Dylan was never a great singer. I love Bob. He's one of my 4 to 5 all-time favorites in any sort of art form, any sort of music. I'm going to get his Times Are Changing tattoo on my arm one day. But I do think that, yeah, people look at him more as a really good songwriter, perhaps the best ever, in my opinion, the best songwriter ever, but his voice was just middle of the line. Sometimes it could be good, but most times it was always just decent to just not very good. But not everyone can be Steve Perry or Freddie Mercury, but Bob's songwriting ability more than made up for it. But I do feel like most people realize Bob was not a good singer. This one's from Ruben Sane. Ringo was one of the best drummers ever. I agree 100%. I do think Ringo gets underrated a lot of the times because he wasn't a Keith Moon or a John Bonham when it came to skill set, but Ringo was very simple, and that was so awesome to see as a Beatles fan, not experiencing it live, but going back and watching it now, whether it's Come Together, Here Comes the Sun, all the stuff that he did, he showed you that less can be more. The less you do, the more they got to invest in what you do. You know what I mean? And he was really simple with all of his stuff, but it was so, so good. In a band that had a lot of egos, Ringo probably had the most tame ego of them all. And obviously without them, or without him, I should say, the Beatles don't get anywhere close to where they were as far as a band. So I do think Ringo is severely underrated on the all-time scale. He's not going to wow you like a Keith Moon or a John Bonham or Joey Jordison, anyone like that. But the stuff that he was able to do with who he was doing it with and how simple he made everything look, and again, that less is more approach to it, he's always going to be underrated to me. Finally, from James Stocks, Nirvana would have been great if they had a lead singer with a decent voice. Kurt Cobain's a weird case to me. I do feel like he was fantastic as a music talent. I don't think he was a vocalist that Lane Staley or Chris Cornell was. But I also believe Nirvana was probably the biggest band of the 90s, if not one of them, whether or not it's because of the albums they released or their following or just the whole grunge movement, whether it's because Kurt's premature passing. I have no idea, but I do think Nirvana is the biggest band of the 90s, and I don't think they get to that point without Kurt Cobain. You can put in anybody else to play that role as Kurt. He had the look for it. He had the attitude for it. He was that guy for that period of time in the 90s where he was able to be the lead guy for possibly the biggest band of the entire decade. So I got no gripe with Kurt Cobain. I thought his voice was good. Again, it isn't like a Bob Dylan thing where it's just meh, but his songwriting is so good he makes up for it. He was good. He was just often overshadowed by guys who had better voices in that same decade, but because the band itself was so good, he was able to, by all means, hold his own. So with that being said, I do think Cobain, again, him and Nirvana, it's a perfect fit. That will do it for this video. As I said before, by all means, leave a comment down below on this TikTok or on Facebook.com/SchnozzyMusic or YouTube.com/Schnozzy. I'll be more than happy to answer your hot take there. Thank you all for watching. We'll probably do this again here soon. This was quite fun to just interact and communicate and talk about music and just the awesome things about it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.